are listening to the 10 Questions with the Musical Mind podcast with your host, Peter Harris.
Hello everybody, Peter Harris here for 10 Questions with the Musical Mind. This week I want to discuss the band Pom Pom Squad. Pom Pom Squad formed in Brooklyn, and the group released an EP entitled Hate It Here in 2017. Since then, the band began playing local venues and really cut their teeth learning the ins and outs of live gigs. Now, with the recent release of their second EP, Owl, Pom Pom Squad has really shown a continued growth in dynamics and songwriting. Vocalist, songwriter, and guitarist Berrin, kind of the leader and former of this group, really dug in and exposed herself to produce authentic lyrics, explore pain, struggle, and the inner drive that enables her and us to overcome difficult realities. Mia joins us for this episode, and we really discuss her influences, the evolution of Pom Pom Squad, and how she's navigating a changing music industry. So I think you'll enjoy this conversation with Berrin. Hey, Mia, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing well. Thank you for calling in, and we appreciate having you on the show.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Let me start off asking you, for those who don't know, how was it that you got Pom Pom Squad started? I mean, was it just you and an idea, or did you already know some of the other members like Shelby and stuff, or what was the whole genesis of the band?
Yeah, I actually started Pom Pom Squad when I was in high school. I started playing guitar when I was maybe 13 or 14. It was something I did for fun, but not anything I ever really took seriously. When I was maybe junior or senior in high school, I found out about riot girl punk and grunge and really had this sort of awakening of just like, oh, I can do that. I was always a huge music fan, but I never really thought of it as something that made sense for me or even was fathomable. Mm-hmm. And my best friend growing up, she's a drummer, and so we kind of tried to start this band, and she was in the school band and I was in theater, and it just sort of never came to be. And so I started making music like any fucking. Can I swear? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, it's fine.
You mean this isn't radio? But anyway, so I started making music like most people who grew up with laptops, which is I just started recording demos in my bedroom and, had a lot of fun with it. And, it was just sort of like fucking around and having a good time. And then when I moved to New York, I think the second ever demo that I put out of a song called Lux Lisbon, which we actually recently redid, was on satellite radio, just kind of by accident. Somebody had heard it and played it. And I was like, oh, and that was kind of my first hint that, is good, or that, there's a universe in which people could actually like it. Right. But yeah, I met Shelby and Maria a couple years after that. After I'd kind of started playing shows around New York, I really fell into playing in a band and was playing with another lineup for a while. That ended up splitting ways, and I was getting these opportunities to play shows, with bands that I loved and at venues that I really loved. And I was kind of like, well, I either have to stop or I have to do this by myself. And I think it was actually the second time I ever played solo that I met Maria and Shelby, which was kind of incredible, very serendipitous.
Yeah. And it's neat because really, I was in high school in the 80s, and, coming out there and then college in the 90s, you wouldn't have been able to do this because we didn't have a computer. There was definitely no home studios. It was just you couldn't do it. It's neat now that you can actually get started on your own and do that kind of stuff and actually make a real actual song, and have it end up on satellite radio or, Spotify or what have you. It's pretty neat.
Right. I mean, the access that I think people my age have, I'm 22, is kind of unprecedented. Sure. And I think that's kind of why there's been such sweeping changes in the music industry. I think the same way that Napster happened and people in the music industry were like, holy shit, if there's no middleman between, the public and music, there's no business, there's no business for that. There's no reason.
But there's still a big problem with on the payment end. I mean, I think you get paid 0.003 of a cent for a Spotify stream and that kind of thing.
You get paid even less than that. It's prorated. So it's like, I also just went to, I ended up like halfway through my college career, like transferring to music business school just because I was so fascinated by it, and also just felt really pushed around, in that world, like really early on, in being like, well, I don't understand how mixing works. I don't understand how mastering works. I don't understand how the business part of it works, and I was like, I like writing songs, but I hate having to explain myself or having to, fight for what I think the worth of my music is. And so it's a really complicated world right now because it's like these power structures are trying to, maintain power and maintain a monopoly over something that's like free, essentially, which is, for a lot of people now, the ability to make music and get it heard and just put it out.
Right. Sorry, it's the exact opposite of what it was, 30 years ago. It used to be that you played live to sell your album, and now it's the exact opposite. You put out an album so you have something to tour by. And it's, that was not the case in previous times. When you were first starting, it's funny because when I listen to your stuff, especially, Hate It Here and stuff like that, but when I hear off the new EP, Owl, like Heavy, listen to that stuff, I'm like, this would have been so perfect in 1994 or 95. And then I think, like, wow, that's been 30 years. It's about time for that sound to come back again. But were those people an influence you? Like, what was your first quote unquote favorite when you were really digging into music?
Yeah, I mean, I think this probably still holds true today, but I think, an artist that I still kind of go back to is Courtney Love and Hole.
Mm-hmm.
I, was kind of turned on to that whole scene by, like, when I was maybe 14 or 15, like, found Burger Records and, like, surf rock and this kind of DIY punk, and I was like, this is so, and, it's that sort of, I always think of Rick Rubin talking about early Def Jam when he's like, oh, I like heard music that he's like that I knew was bad. Like he's like, I just wanted to make like dumb music that actually became like the new norm of like cool, of cool.
Right.
And I think DIY for me, it was this thing that it was like, it's like not actually dumb. It's like that thing where you go back and forth where you're like, this is so stupid. This is actually genius. This is dumb.
Right.
These kind of bands that were so simple that it was like brilliant. Like the Ramones. Like that's a perfect example.
I was going to say, it's a perfect example of what the initial reaction was to punk, when you had the Sex Pistols and the Ramones. It was like, is this just stupid or is there actually a subtle genius to this?
Well, the thing is, like, I had to learn a whole cover set of Ramones songs, and that was like maybe the hardest thing that I've ever had to musically do, because it's so deceptively simple that you're like, oh, that part repeats, this happens again, this goes to this, like,
right.
Stuff so simple that you miss it, which is kind of brilliant. And so, I found surf rock, and then I started reading interviews with these like DIY kids in LA who, were talking about like, Joy Division and Nirvana, and weirdly I was super late to Nirvana, but I found like Bikini Kill through a lot of the like LA girl bands, and really, really loved Bikini Kill, and was like, I'm a Riot Girl, and made this whole like, was trying to have like Riot Girl meetings at my high school and shit, and and when I found Courtney Love, it was like this, I don't know, there's something about her persona that like fascinates me so deeply, where she's just like this completely like contradictory character, and the way she plays with like what is feminine and what isn't, and I kind of think of her as like, she's this like pretty girl who thinks she's an ugly girl who desperately wants to be a pretty girl who feels ugly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, even like later songs like Malibu and stuff, that kind of fits into that whole persona, definitely.
Yeah, and there was like her when she was, like teenage whore Courtney Love, and then, later she went on to be this like Hollywood fucking darling, and like, walking the red carpet with like a clean haircut and shit, and it's just this sort of, she always pushed what she could get away with, and I think she used grunge as like as almost her way to break through to this kind of more mainstream thing. But what fascinated me was like watching her like VMA performance, and like being like, there was a point in time where like this sound, like she could perform Violet at the fucking MTV VMAs, and that was like mainstream and cool, and that was like only slightly like alternative to what was happening.
Yeah, it's funny. It doesn't take much for what is a deep underground scene. It just takes one kind of the right kind of nudges to suddenly be okay. And that's with everything. I mean, what was unacceptable heavy metal, that you'd never get on the radio, 5 years later it's on top 40. Maybe not now, but it just changes, and that's what's good about it.
Well, I think there's this kind of like, history working in thesis and antithesis. Like there's always, the more, this sort of mainstream or polished or, perfect sound becomes the norm, which is kind of what I see happening now. And in a really cool way, like this kind of hyper pop movement of like Charlie XCX and like 100 Gex and like these things that are like so critical of pop, but also like engaging in it in a really interesting way. Like that. And also, meanwhile, there's like the, Justin Bieber's and like Selena Gomez's of the world who are like, really truly major label pop. There's this like underbelly that grows because there's a demand for the opposite.
Right.
And I think that, balance just shifts. And I see that happening with like the underground scene in New York, or just, like indie rock bands like Soccer Mommy and like Snail Mail and this, this Mitski, even like this demand for something niche and like kind of, I mean literally, I guess that's where alternative music comes from, but
sure,
alternative to the mainstream.
But there is always going to be a demand for stuff that is music as opposed to product. And yeah, I think every once in a while that bubbles over where actual music can gain a foothold over quote unquote product. And by that I mean your Justin Bieber's and your things like that. Hard rock and all that kind of stuff got so over the top and polished by the late 80s. That's what bred the ground for Nirvana and, Soundgarden and things like that, which, because it was just refreshing. It was different. It wasn't 30 chorus tracks and a snare drum that sounded like a thunderclap. It was just ridiculous at some point. But it didn't start off like that. It started off more genuine, but over a decade, every genre just gets more and more influence, and the record industry gets their paws in it and polishes it up to where it's a product. So.
And I also feel like in a way, like, for me, I'm an underground DIY artist, but it's like I also feel like everything, even for people in this world, is somewhat product based, just because of like the demand that the internet creates, and this sort of like, if you're not making something, like the same way somebody could disappear for like 2 years on an album cycle and come back and have people be interested. Like I feel like that's not, it doesn't happen so much anymore unless you're like A/B list. Like if people disappear for 2 years and come back with an album, which is, seems like a natural part of the creative process, like the press shifts and everything changed. And also, press is, in turmoil for many, many reasons. But, I think also for me, where the conversation of, things being genuine or not comes in becomes super cloudy, because I just think like, I feel genuine in what I make, but I also think there's so much more of a focus for artists early in their process, more so than there used to be, to like also be marketing and doing development and like all the stuff that, the label system used to do to kind of bring people up to snuff with whatever was selling well. Like it's expected that, artists do that themselves now, like True. You have to be the full marketing team. You have to come to the table with, a million followers already.
That's a good point. And your comment about the frequency you put out. One thing I've thought for years, and I like what you've done. You've released 2 EPs so far, and I don't know what your plans are in the future. But I've been arguing for a couple years. There's almost no point in making, unless you want to, a full album. Like I don't understand why bands don't just be like, here's the next song we've come out with and release it. And if you release 5 songs a year, fantastic. But it's always something new and current to the fans. People aren't running out and buying CDs anymore. So why not just put out songs as you create them? To my point, I think the EP is actually probably a smarter package. It's something you come up with 4 or 5 songs, 6 songs, and release that when it's done, instead of wasting 2 years to come up with your quote unquote 11-song package, because it's unnecessary in this time.
Yeah. Well, the same way you were saying before, it's like you make the albums so you have something to tour. There is still this like emphasis I find on having an album, but it's true. I mean, there's I feel like albums now are kind of like a luxury. Like the person that I think of when I think of like a really artistically successful blank actually is Rihanna of Auntie. Like that album was like she had a story arc. It was genre bending. She had like a Tame Impala cover. Like she was really like, it was some shit. Like she was experimenting and really made like the best of this long form format in such an interesting way. And then she dipped forever, you know. We're still waiting on her album, and I think that's kind of fascinating. Is it's like then albums can be like art again. It can be like the reason being like an artistic choice rather than just like, she probably makes all her money doing the fucking features with like DJ Khaled and then like the fucking Santana sample. I forget what song that is. Wild Thoughts, but it's like that's where the money comes from, and then she can disappear for however long she wants, you know, put out, you know, lingerie and makeup and like come back with another fully formed album and like freak people out. I like that's kind of incredible and weird and really weird.
It is. Yeah, and that's true. Yeah, if there's an actual reason for an album's existence where it's a story arc or a concept album, then that's a different argument. Yeah, that's totally plausible. Now, when you were first getting into the stuff, how important were, I'm asking this because you're the singer and a guitar player, how important were lyrics to you when you were first, you know, really absorbing music as a teenager? And as for me, because music's been my whole life, but for me, vocals is more about the sonic texture than the actual words or message. Not exclusively, but you know, were lyrics as important to you, or were you more about just the overall sound, or how did it strike you at first, if you can remember that far back?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a really big lyric person. I think, but I think like my first favorite like song, and this was when I was like a little kid, which is sort of hilarious, was like Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. Like, I really loved sad, depressing songs. I found them really fascinating, and I loved a story. There was there's like a newer Pixies song that I just heard, and I like love it because I know that it's exactly the kind of song that I would have been obsessed with when I was a kid. And I was a really creative kid, and I would like listen to music and like draw the characters if there were like people with names and songs, which is one of my favorite things. So I've always been really big on lyrics, but I you know, what you're saying about sonic texture is like, is really true. It's something that I think I realized probably when I was a teenager, that I was kind of like, the way that a lyric lays over a melodic verse is sort of like, when you can like tell someone's lying, or when somebody says something to you, like, oh, you know, did you eat today? And you know that they're actually saying like, I love you and I care about you. And I love lyrics. I love lyrics a lot. I'm a huge sucker for lyrics. But Ow is sort of a funny experiment for me, because it was the first time that I was really self-conscious about my lyrics. I try to be kind of too smart with myself when I write a lot of the times, and Ow was probably the first time I gave myself permission to just sort of like say what I, you know, give the like 10-cent word rather than the $1 million word.
Right.
So that was new for me.
And that's got to be tough. I mean, because I don't know if everybody understands. You're really putting yourself, like you personally, out there when you're the one writing the lyrics and singing them. I mean, even if most people listening who don't know you personally, they just take the lyrics at face value and they like the song or don't. But for you, you got to be sitting there going, don't you understand what a personal admission this is? And it's hard. It's got to be hard to commit to that.
Yeah, in some ways, but I think also the thing that a lot of people don't always realize about songwriting is like, by the time I am ready to give it to other people, it's like I wrote it, or arranged it, probably sat on it for a while, like showed it to friends, you know, played it for my bandmates, rehearsed it for the band, you know, then recorded it, you know, mixed it, mastered it. And then it's like and then you wait another like, you know, 2 weeks, month, whatever, before anyone actually hears it. So I feel like by the time it comes out, you know, there's a part of myself that's probably already accepted it, or, you know, feels a little bit of a detachment from it.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, it's personal, and it, you know, it's I think it's harder for me to get the thoughts out initially than it is to actually let other people hear them. Just
sense.
because I think sometimes the hardest thing to do as a writer is admit things to yourself, more than it is to other people. I think, like Heavy for me was, I wrote the whole OW EP when I was going through a particularly bad bout with depression, which is something I deal with, have dealt with, and something that I also just feel like I could never explain to myself. Like, you start having meta feelings where you're like angry at yourself for how sad you are, or you're frustrated with yourself for how angry you are. You just
Right.
you have feelings about your feelings, and like that's the part that sucks. And for me, being able to put it into a concrete shape felt so much better than feeling it in a vacuum. Being able to like look at it and show it to another person and be like, this is how my depression feels. Feels really good, honestly. I think by the time I did, and I'm super precious about my songs even before I show them to my bandmates. I get super weird about showing people songs before they're ready, especially if they're not, like my really, really close inner circle. And my bandmates are like my family. I see them more than my blood family at this point. And I'm even precious with them. And it's just, that part is really personal. The part where you kind of have to bang it into shape, I feel like is the really personal part.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, absolutely. Now, going to the physical delivery of lyrics, like things I like, and this is on the same thing as far as putting yourself out there. Like on your cover of Cellophane, which FKA Twigs, I like that you weren't afraid to push your voice a little bit past its comfort zone. Like there's some parts where you're kind of, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? It's at the top of your register, and you're kind of squeaking it out, and I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but I like that because it adds to the emotion and the vulnerability of your delivery. Now, is something like that hard for you, or like do you obsess over I want to do another take of that where it sounds stronger, or do you like the frailty of certain deliveries? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I think there's definitely a huge part of me that gets nervous. I mean, that song in particular, I grew up singing pretty seriously, and I sang mostly like R&B and pop and musical theater stuff. And so it's been a while since I kind of heard my voice in that way, and had a lot of insecurity about like not being like a trained quote unquote singer. I also recently dealt with all of these issues with my voice. I had not a serious surgery, but I had surgery because turns out I have a really fucked up septum. And so I had all this trouble singing, and Selfie was actually the last thing I recorded before I had this surgery. And I was horribly self-conscious about not being able to hit the notes and kind of the technical of the song that everybody loved so much in the original version. But like, I think the other part of me is like, I love being vulnerable. I love ugly stuff. I love imperfect things. I like fucking up. It's a skill that I've taught myself. I do. I love it. I love fucking up. I think it's so important. And I think I spent a lot of my life being a huge control freak and perfectionist, and I still have those qualities in many, many, many ways. But there's something in me in the past year and that OW really helped me with, which was sort of letting go of an expectation of myself that like it wasn't fair, like the fantasy version of myself that I had thought that I was or was supposed to be for years and years and years and years, that I finally was like, oh, that's not me. I can't do that. So I think I kind of do like, no, I really do like the squeaks in my voice and Cellophane and all the weird shit and the screamy sounds. I think it's fun, and I think it's a part of yourself you don't get to do every day.
Right. No, I think that's perfect, and it is. It's personal, and it adds to the character, and I think it adds to the genuineness of a lot of songs. Like, go back to Nirvana we talked about earlier. Like, if you take a song like "Come as You Are" and have Pavarotti sing it, that doesn't work. It doesn't work with a perfect vocal. It's got to have that strain to it. Now, speaking of OW, I love the little ending outro. Who did you get to do the strings on that, or how was that done?
Yeah, that was So Shelby and Maria, I accidentally poached from another band, which was sort of a funny story. I met them when they were playing in this band in Brooklyn called Priestess. That's kind of like a hard rock, like metal situation. And Jackie, who is the front person of that band, that still exists, also plays violin and reluctantly played violin on Owl. Very, very grateful that she did. And that the outro is just, I love violin. I just think it's such an emotional instrument. And I knew the intro needed violins. And when we were mixing it, I just had the idea to solo all the violins and just play them separately and mix them separately. And that became this like beautiful little album ending that we all like listened to and cried.
Yeah, it's a perfect little bookend. Absolutely. Definitely. Now, talking about your equipment, what drew you to, from what I can tell from pictures and stuff, you play a lot of Fender Jaguars and Mustangs.
Yeah.
Was that kind of what you first started out on, or what drew you to the sounds of those guitars?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, I started out with a shitty acoustic and then a shitty electric.
Right.
And then another shitty electric that I gave to my baby cousin. And I was playing semi-seriously at that point. You know, I dropped out of, I moved to New York to act, actually, like most people do. And I dropped out of this prestigious conservatory to like skip class and play in a band, like a true loser. And I don't know, I've been playing for like a year and a half in New York at that point, and I was like, you know, I had a Squire Stratocaster that I had been playing, and I was like, okay, I know that I'm getting better at guitar because I can make this guitar sound good. Right. And I honestly was drawn to the Mustang mostly because I thought it was really cute. Right. I thought it was a really, really cute guitar, and they had just put out the Shell Pink like remake Mustang where they don't have those like shitty kill switches and stuff that like cut up your hands. So that was my first kind of investment. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna save up. I'm gonna buy myself a nice guitar, and I ended up really loving the sound and fucking with it, and then you know eventually kind of learning what I didn't like about it and how to like modify it and play with it and what pedals I wanted. I mean, I kind of learned everything by doing, really. And when we recorded Hate It Here, actually, my old guitarist, this guy Alex, had this custom Jazzmaster. It was beautiful, and it was from this shop in New York called Rivington Guitars, I'm pretty sure, which has kind of more specialty, like custom stuff, and a lot of vintage stuff. And I just loved how heavy the sound was, and it also was kind of this like goalpost for me because he was this amazing guitarist and I was this really shitty guitarist, and I felt really bad about myself and about that. And I was kind of like, I'll get a Jazzmaster when I'm like good, you know, when I'm a good guitarist. And so this my current guitar, who is named Miss World, is like a Jazzmaster Jaguar kind of combo custom baby with a rosewood neck, and just has like the heaviest, like most incredible sound, and is so malleable. Like I can like, there's switches on it that kind of let you do like in between pickups, and it does have a kill switch, which I abuse horribly and ruin shows with. But yeah, I mean, I remember playing it for the first time in practice, and like all of my bandmates were like, "Whoa!" Like it just gets it's just such a fucking incredible sound.
Yeah, I always feel I'm a shitty guitar player myself, and I tend to put my pickup selector like on one pickup and or whatever my favorite is, and leave it there like almost exclusively. And then I'll see like fantastic guitar players, you know, play live, and they're switching between pickups 3 or 4 times a song. I'm like, I guess I just suck because that would never occur to me. Like,
no, like I'm an asshole. Like, my bassist Maria, she was like, "Can you actually like turn down a little like right before we play the song?" And I was like, "No!" Like I was like, "Don't make me switch anything." Like I still hate changing pickups. I like finding the sound that I like and keeping it as simple as I can.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, don't challenge my musical intellect by making me change pickups and.
No, it's more like I get so uncomfortable so easily that if I change anything, I'll get so in my head about it. And so I'll pretend that it's for like a cooler artistic reason than just because I'll get shy. But it's literally just because I'll get shy and I'll get like nervous that I'm not going to do it in time.
Right.
It's going to fuck with me or whatever. Yeah. So I don't want to make it sound any cooler or more interesting than what
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. You find what works with you. I remember back in the 90s, I'd try to learn Soundgarden songs. And every Soundgarden song was in a different tuning. So I was like, fuck that. I don't feel like I have one guitar. I don't feel like retuning everything to learn to play for 30 minutes and figure out that I can't play this. It's just a hassle. Now, if you have 5 guitars and you can leave one in a different tuning or whatever, that might be something different. But yeah. Now, you've got a lot of exciting things coming up. Show in San Francisco, and then you're going on tour with Disc. I mean, it's got to feel pretty cool to be getting essentially across country and doing a tour. I mean, how's that going? Or how did that formulate?
Yeah, it's really exciting. I love playing shows. It's maybe my favorite part of the whole process is the kind of like, you get one chance to do it and you just give it to the universe and you're like, if I fuck up on stage, I fuck up on stage. And, I tend to be pretty heady, and, playing shows is such a great way to just like lose control and not I have to force myself to not be in control. Like playing live is the perfect way to do that. So to get to actually share the show, which is something I'm so proud of, with other people, and that there's demand for that, is kind of insane. So yeah, we're playing Noise Pop Festival in San Francisco with Rosie Tucker, who I really, really, really like a lot. I also love San Francisco. So that all came to be basically because I've been playing in New York for 3-4 years now. 3 years. Definitely 3 years. We used to play like 3 shows a month. We used to basically play like once a week, and just would play for nobody, and then sometimes play for somebody, and just kind of cut our teeth. And when it became the kind of the lineup that it is now of me, Shelby, Maria, and Alex, we just really found like a sort of comfort zone with our live show, and we're so comfortable together. And we recently got picked up by a booking agent, which was fucking awesome, and is actually how it works, which I didn't know until recently.
Right.
So I kind of got to skip the part of being booking my own tours, which is strange and really lucky. But we're working with UTA right now, and we have some really, really amazing agents who are so supportive of us.
Yeah, and as far as cutting your teeth on the, when you guys start playing shows for nobody and just a few people, everybody dreams of, maybe we'll make it big, whatever, but there's got to be, starting off small has probably got some invaluable lessons. I mean, you don't want to be on stage for the first time in front of 3,000 people, and that's the first time you've had a cable go bad in the middle of a song or break a string or the PA goes out. I mean, that's not the kind of things you want to happen first in front of a bunch of people.
Definitely. And it's like, I've been to shows, like I remember going to like Lollapalooza when I was maybe 18 and watching an artist who literally after the show was like, this was my first show. And I was just kind of like, what the fuck? Like,
how does that happen? Yeah.
But that's a real thing, is like, especially with the internet, like you can make music in your bedroom for 3.5 years and get played on radio and do all this shit and make a lot of money and make more stuff and have 1 million listeners and 1 million followers and never left your bedroom, never played with a band, never played with another person. And it's interesting, and that's definitely like a way to do it, and like good on you, But I definitely feel like I learned a lot of valuable lessons by like getting out there and having to do it, and kind of, not having the trial by fire in front of 3,000 people. Definitely.
Right.
Because I've had some bad shows, and I used to get like mad at my audiences. Because I think the thing that people don't realize too, and I'm 100% guilty of this, I think everyone is, but like when I would go to a show, I would be on my phone, I'd be like talking to people, I'd be hanging out, and it didn't mean that I wasn't enjoying the show. It just meant like I was enjoying the show and also being on my phone. But when you're on stage and you look out and somebody's like whispering to their friend or on their phone, I'm like, holy shit, they hate me and they hate this.
Like you take it personal, right?
Absolutely. And I used to take it so personally, and I would get like pissed and like talk shit about my audience who was like not doing anything wrong.
Right.
And it sucked, and it just made me look like an asshole. And also, you know, people would come up to me after the show who I, you know, clocked in the audience as like hating it and be like, I loved your set, like I loved this song, and then I would just be like, I'm the worst.
Right.
I'm the worst person. So that's valuable. Like that's something that, you know, I needed for sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. On the opposite side, I talked to maybe a year ago a guy who was in a band that got pretty big in the 80s for a while, and then, you know, of course, late 80s, and of course all that fell apart in the early 90s. And he said what a humbling experience it was. Like he went from like stadiums opening up for huge bands and playing for 12,000 people, and then like a year later, 2 years later, he's playing in a coffee house on an acoustic, and he can tell like the people there were just like, God, tell that guy to turn down. I'm trying to talk to my buddy, or you know, like he said it was such a humbling experience to just do the opposite.
Yeah.
But that'd be tough. But
I mean, yeah, I haven't had the career where I can, you know, imagine yet, but that's real. It's so real because, you know, there's sort of I don't know. It's scary to even think about. You know what I mean? Like being on top of the world and then not being on top of the world. But I've seen a lot of that. I grew up, you know, kind of around the industry, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of like going to bed a rock star and waking up a peasant. You know, because it is such a fickle.
you know, but there's something to be said for the passion that someone like you and your bandmates have to have, because you're risking a lot. You're risking no financial reward. You're risking personal anguish and rejection, and you have to look at it and be like, well, this is worth it to me to pursue this. And that's a tough thing to do. It takes strong people to do that. You know, it's not to be taken lightly.
Well, it's funny. Like I've had this sort of internal grappling lately of like wondering if it's like selfish or like not even selfish, but like a waste, quote unquote, to spend money on art, like to have a budget for something like a music video. And then I'm, and there's the part of me who like is a person who lives in a society, who is like, how bizarre is it that, I'm spending money on a guitar or a space or a filmmaker or whatever to like make a thing.
Right.
But then, at the same time, it's like I came to some of the most important realizations about myself and the people around me through art. And if somebody hadn't kind of been ballsy enough to be like, you know what, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to spend money on looking really cute and,
right.
Making a music video, whatever it is, like, it's something that I probably wouldn't have learned or gotten. And, the deeper I get into this, the more I realize how unprepared I and probably many, many young artists are. And, I'm in an extremely privileged place because I went to music business school, and I was in one of the fucking best programs in the country, and, had amazing mentors who were in the business and who believed in me and supported me and, told me that what I was doing wasn't dumb,
Right.
And I still don't always feel prepared for what I'm about to do. And all these things that you see other artists do, especially artists that were, when I was a teenager, I idolized DIY. I idolized, New York venues and all these places that in a year I played that I didn't realize were kind of like, not that they're like small potatoes, but like that I realized to other people, like for me, that was like being like a star, like being
absolutely.
In New York. And then, I finally had mentors be like, yeah, maybe aim a little higher. Like maybe think of yourself beyond, playing in Brooklyn. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, but that's natural. That's natural growth. That's. I think it's important to go through that steps, and then it's perfectly reasonable, I think, for you to attain those things. Then somebody else point out like, hey, you might want to expand beyond that universe, and I think that's pretty legitimate. Speaking of which, what you just mentioned, Heavy Heavy is a well done video. I see that you directed it. It's really well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I co-directed it with my friend Sammy and this girl Griffin, who we're both other students. Sammy's still a student. But thank you. I think I'm super visually minded, and I kind of remember coming up with the concept for that video and having a lot of people who actually knew about film tell me like, it's not going to work. Like, it's not really going to it's not going to play. You can't do the whole thing in front of a white background, whatever it was. And so hear anybody like say anything nice about it, and to see it, I'm really proud of it. To see it come out that way is like so gratifying.
No, with the white background, I think what works in that situation is it's edited well. The editing jumps back and forth enough where the viewer doesn't even really focus on they're just in front of a white background. I think it changes and the pace is fast enough that doesn't really come into it. So I think it pulls it off.
Thank you.
Speaking of which, in that video, the more I listen to it, I can't tell if that's actually you screaming or if that's just feedback.
Yeah, it's both.
Okay.
That's so funny because we recorded that. So there was like a demo version of Heavy Heavy before there was an actual version, which is actually something I don't do that often. Usually we just practice as a band. But I fully thought that I was going to record and release Owl like from my bedroom, like mixed in Logic, all by myself. I started making it, when I was living in this like shoebox apartment in Manhattan, and was really, really new to recording still, but just like would come home so excited every day to like record something new. And that was around the time that I met Maria and Shelby, and Maria is like an amazing engineer and producer. And so she and I were in her kitchen one day, and she just hooked me up to a mic, and we like ran it through an amp and a delay and all this shit. And I was just like making insane noises and like scaring her pet cats. And I used that in the demo and sent that around. And when it actually came time to record it, I redid like half of the screams, but I loved the stuff we did in the kitchen so much that it actually like made its way into.
That's great.
Back.
Yeah, there's certain things like that you can get, and even if you get better equipment, you're like, I can't exactly duplicate like this 10 seconds or this 3 seconds. You can't do it. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you calling in, and I'm excited. I'll be. I follow you on Twitter. I'm assuming you're on Facebook. Where can people follow you? Like, your website, et cetera, to check out dates and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we just made a website actually. It's pompomsquadband.com. On Instagram, we're at Pom Pom Squad. Twitter at Pom Pom Squad. Facebook at Pom Pom Squad Sucks with an X.
Great.
And we post everything to Bandcamp, and all of our dates are up there too.
Sounds good. Well, I'll be following you, and I like the stuff, and it's a pleasure to talk to you and get some insight into your creative process and all that kind of thing. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Mia.
Thank you. Thanks for talking to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll be looking forward to more good stuff from you in the future.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hey, you're welcome. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.